Okay, so to get started, I'm Karen McNeil. I'm with Georgetown University. And I'm here to talk about the Tunisian Arabic corpus that I'm working on. I have PowerPoint slides, which I'll bring up. On this project, my partner is Milad Faiza of University of Virginia, so when I refer to us or we, he's the other part of that. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to make it to this conference. There we go. Okay, this is obviously a very large project with many. Go over everything fairly quickly and give you broad strokes, and then open it up to questions as soon as possible so I can talk in depth about the parts that you're interested in, which might not necessarily be the same as the parts I'm interested in. Just to go over what a corpus is for the people who are not in the linguistic side might not know. A corpus is a large collection of texts used for lots of different linguistic kind of properties. Like, for instance, the presentation that Becky gave yesterday about examining code switching is a project that could really be done with a corpus, comparing Moroccan usage of this with Tunisian, and it's also very useful for lexicography. Like most modern large-scale dictionaries are made from corpora. Also, authentic teaching materials, like if you're teaching a particular grammatical point or a particular vocab item, you can really show students how this is used in natural language. Also, natural language processing, which is the computer usage of linguistics. So, for instance, when you call your bank and it says, "Would you like checking, savings," and understands what you say, that's a natural language program which was made using very, very large corpora. And just to give a introductory note of why I'm working on this project. A few years ago, when I had a personal reason to start learning Tunisian Arabic, and I had already studied Egyptian and Shami and Iraqi, and I thought, oh, well, I'll just go teach myself Tunisian. That should be easy. I was somewhat surprised to find out that there exists almost no materials at all for Tunisian Arabic. There is no dictionary, there's no reference grammar in print in English. There's no basic course. All these materials that are in existence for Iraqi and most other dialects, although there are still some other large holes, weren't in existence. So it was very challenging to try to learn a dialect without any materials at all for it. There are some existing Arabic corpus, and actually there are a lot more now than there used to be. It's kind of a developing field. These are some of the major ones. And just to show you, this is kind of a standard structure of corpus as they exist now. You can see, I want to highlight this because my corpus differs significantly from this, and I want to talk about why I chose to do that. So you can see that it's very much a rigid file structure. So over here you have, this is for the International Corpus of Arabic. The first folder there is written, and then they divide that into press, and then newspapers, and then strategic sciences, and then politics. And then all of these texts under here are in the politics thing. It's a very standard way of organizing corpora. There's several problems with it in that it's very fixed and rigid. So, for instance, a text can only be in one category, whereas in real life, if you've got something long like a newspaper article or a novel or even something short like a blog post, it'll probably fit into more than one category. And a second problem with it is that you can't really alter the structure once you've set it up. It's very fixed. These are ICA's target genres. I mentioned, I'm going to skip through this because I mentioned in the paper about, the issues with corpora that are based only on standard Arabic. And I don't need to belabor the fact that Arabic is very heterogeneous. Actually, when I've given this talk to people who are not familiar with Arabic, one of the ways I illustrated, the wide varieties that exist was I mentioned when I was listening to Tunisian radio and they were describing Egyptian Masasala, Aizat Tagawaz, and a sequel to that, Mish Aizat Tagawaz, and to kind of emphasize the point, the radio person translated in Tunisian. So she said, Yani nahab naris wa ma nahabsh naris. So just looking at those two sentences, you can see major lexical and syntactic differences between two dialects for two countries that are kind of fairly close together geographically. And the point of that being that you really can't use MSA corpora or corpora that are developed for other dialects, they can't really be used to fill in missing corpora. We really need to have extensive corpora for MSA and then extensive corpora for all the major dialect groups. These are some of the ones that are already in existence for the Arabic dialects. So you can see Egyptian, Levantine, Gulf, Iraqi, Levantine, probably sensing a pattern and maybe something missing, like a whole continent. So, which brings the question, why am I starting with Tunisian? I really, really agree with Devin's point yesterday that we should have dictionaries for every one of the Arabic dialects. And I know that if I give you all a list of which ones are most desperately needed, Tunisian would probably not be on most of your #1 parts. Personally, I'm interested in Tunisian, so that's the reason I'm doing it. But there's also very good reasons aside from that, which is it's, as I mentioned, completely neglected, very lacking in materials. It's also linguistically very interesting. Sociolinguistics students who are interested in code switching and these kind of subjects, they have a lot to study with Tunisian. And it's North African, which is so severely neglected in most every possible way. Now, the first major problem that we come to when developing a corpus for an unwritten language, like Tunisian or like most of any of the Arabic dialects, is sources. In developing this corpus, I'm concentrating on 3 major groups of sources. The first is traditional written sources that are have always been written in dialect. So we've got the folk poetry and screenplays are great sources. And then the new written sources are blogs, emails, Facebook. And then the third source is transcribed audio, which I have a small amount of represented, not very much until now because it's very expensive and time-consuming. Right now, I think I'm paying about $1 per minute of audio for transcription, so it's very expensive. Now, another major question with developing corpora is balance. There's this idea that when developing a corpus that's supposed to represent a language, you should have, the genres balanced to represent the entire language so that you don't end up with a lot of vocabulary from one particular sphere that's not representative. So, for instance, looking forward to when we start working on the dictionary, it's going to be, I'm going to take, the top 10,000 to 15,000 words as represented to the corpus to include in the dictionary. And if I have a lot of texts that are from one very specific field, then maybe some words are going to end up in that list that shouldn't be, and maybe I'll be missing some words that really should be included in the dictionary. But a lot of corpora start out with like a design of I'm going to include, this percentage from, news, and this percentage from sports, and this percentage from everything. That's really kind of difficult to do when I'm kind of struggling to find sources to begin with. So I've decided to take a more pragmatic approach where right now I'm just gathering everything that I can find and putting it in. And I'm going to try to adjust for balance as I go along. Try to notice the problems that come from an unbalanced corpus instead of trying to decide what a balanced corpus looks like from the beginning. When I started this project, I looked at some of the tools, like the one I showed for the International Corpus of Arabic. There's not a lot of corpus management tools, and most of the ones that exist are not meant to deal with right-to-left languages, which cause significant problems for a lot of computers, or for languages that include non-ASCII characters. So I decided pretty early on that I wanted to create my own tools to have the ultimate flexibility. And I think I began making a web tool just because it was what I was familiar with. I'd made websites before, nothing anywhere near this complicated, but it was something I had some experience with, whereas I wouldn't even know how to begin making a desktop program. So the requirements when I set out for it that I was thinking of was I wanted something where we could really easily manage the files. We can make edits, we could add new files and everything in a way that was very easy, and to allow remote collaboration so that, for instance, when I'm here, I can set something to be transcribed, someone else can transcribe it, and then someone in a different location can QC it. Also flexible and expandable. I knew that starting out on this project that I would probably realize new requirements as it went along, so I wanted something that would be, that I would be able to change to the maximum amount in order to meet goals that I don't know exist yet. For those of you who have any kind of technical background, this Corpus development tool I made using the programming language Python and a web framework called Django, which I'll be happy to talk about to extent to anyone who's interested afterwards, since I know most of you probably aren't interested. But the one important technical thing to note is that the database structure, this is called a relational database, which I won't bore you with the details of what that means, but the important part is that all of these are represented by tables. So instead of having one table where everything is included, you can think of a table kind of like an Excel spreadsheet. Instead of having one where you try to cram all the things, it has all these separate tables that are related to each other, which this has several benefits. For instance, I have the authors separately. So for each author, I have their name in Arabic, and then I have a kind of computer-safe rendition of their name in English letters. And now in the future, if I found out that one of these authors actually had a way that they preferred to spell their name in English letters and wanted to change it so that their work was represented with that preferred spelling, I can just go into the authors table and change that, and it will change all of the associated texts, instead of having to go through one by one and possibly having inconsistencies. Okay, so having covered the basics, I'll just show you up for a discussion. So this is tunisia.org. If you go to the main website, this is all you'll see is just a login, which you won't be able to log into. But based somewhat on your input, I really want to build a public face so that other scholars can benefit from this and possibly contribute to it. If, like Alex suggested, we all have little transcripts on our hard drive. If any of your transcripts are in Tunisian and you would like to contribute to the corpus. But I will log in here. Okay. So this is the main page. These are all the associated tables. Some of them, like groups and users, are related to like the authentication and permissions and such. The corpus section has all the tables that are related to actual corpus, and corpus text is the main one that I work with all the time. So here we see all the corpus text, and there's a nice little summary up here that says Tunisian Arabic corpus currently consists of 1,710 documents for a total of 3,501 and some words. The number of texts isn't really very important because I have text in here that's a screenplay of 10,000 words, and I have text in here that's a forum post of 5 words. So really it's the word count that is my marker for progress. So I consider this to be maybe about a third done because I'm hoping to get near the 1 million word mark. You can see on the right there are filters, so it can filter by category, see, for instance, Proverbs. I have a book of Proverbs. Blogs, there are quite a lot of. And internet posts, and then television shows. I have one that is very, very long and is my main source of unbalance right now. You can also filter by status. So, for instance, when Malad goes in and he needs to QC, that's quality control for anyone. He needs to QC the transcripts that have been done. He can just go in, look at what's marked as needs QC, work on them, mark them as complete. So workflow management was like a big consideration in designing this. And adding text. It's very easy. So not really editing text. Just open this up, make the edits. Save. Nicely shows that it was saved successfully. Also, I can display what's been recently. This is by the date modified, so I can look and see what was changed on any particular day. So if I'm looking for a particular work that was done. So a typical workflow is that a text is added directly to the interface here, or else what I just developed and started using a couple weeks ago is I wrote a script that will automatically grab text from the internet. So what I'll do is I'll do a search for a particular word. Barsha is a good one because it's very distinctively Tunisian and you're not likely to find it in any other text. And I'll get a page of Google search results. So I give the Google search results to my script. It goes through, it follows the links to every one of those pages, whether they're forum posts or blogs or anything. And it looks for the tags to say, okay, this marks the title of the page, this marks the title of the post, this marks the username who posted this, and this is the content. And it takes those and then it automatically adds them to the database, like boom, 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 very quickly. And then what I do after that is for things like the tagging, which is going to be very important, is I then send those posts to Mechanical Turk. Is anyone here familiar with Mechanical Turk? Anyone? Okay. Okay, so basically Mechanical Turk is an Amazon service that connects people who have work to be done with people who want to do work for small amounts of money. If you're interested in looking for work and you look for things that have to do with Arabic, this is what you'll see. There's one other researcher who has work available right now, which basically is he's looking for people to translate one sentence from Egyptian Arabic into English to train his automatic translation system. And then also there's my little bit of work, which is I have a 8-minute cut that needs to be translated. So when I, as a requester, look at this, I can see these are all the bits of work that I've had done. And I can go in, I can see these are like the results. So these are people who worked, and then I can approve or reject their work after I've examined it to make sure that it's good. And then if they've done a transcript, then I cut and paste it into the corpus. Or if they've done tags, then I automatically kind of download those into like an Excel file, and then am able to upload them back into the corpus, adding the tags to the existing records. Okay, so that's the overview. So let's see, 17 minutes, so let's open it up for questions. Yeah.
Yeah, well, first of all, I think this is a great idea. I think it'll be useful for all types of things. As you know, Tunisian and other dialects are also ignored in teaching a lot, and I think this would be useful for that as well. And my question was actually so you mentioned all these sources, and I wondered how you were deciding like whether they were Tunisian or not, or and then you mentioned that it could be useful for code switching. I was wondering how you were incorporating that data in, stuff that might be like Arabic and French or Arabic and English, or
which
I
is
don't know if they have like
which is a lot of the data. I've tons of data that is in French entirely, or that's for instance, some of the blogs that I've collected. I was specifically looking for blogs that were in Tunisian. So if I came across a blog that all of the entries were all in French, I did not put it in the dictionary or in the corpus. However, if I came across a blog where a lot of the posts were in Tunisian, some of them were in French, some of them were mixed, then I went ahead and added it. Now, if I were just thinking about my purposes and what I want this for, I would go through and have the computer destroy all the French text in it because it just gets in my way when I'm trying to analyze the Tunisian. But I'm specifically not touching it and leaving it original so that future researchers will be able to examine code switching and other things. As far as deciding what's Tunisian and what's not, one of the other things that Mechanical Turk has been very useful for is when I had people tagging blog posts, I knew that there was some Tunisian somewhere on the page, otherwise it wouldn't come up in the search results. But as to whether that particular post was Tunisian was an open question. So I also gave them the option of, in the template I designed, basically I had a space for them to enter tags, and then I had a little checkbox for them to check if the post was not in Tunisian, if it was in Fusha, or if it was in some other variety of Arabic.
Okay. Is there like the romanization stuff too, like putting Tunisian and Latin characters? Or?
That's going to be an issue and a source. I haven't quite gotten to it yet because the searches that I've done so far have been based on searching for things written in Arabic. Okay. But I think that's going to be a very important source to include. One of the sources that I'm going after quite desperately right now and really want is emails to radio stations. I listen to a lot to Tunisian radios, and they have these great call-in shows that'll be about a particular subject. So you'll have very variety of vocabulary. Maybe one will be about unemployment, one will be about a health topic. So this great vocab. And transcribing the actual shows would be incredibly expensive and time-consuming. But the thing is, people email into these shows with their opinions. So these are emails that are intended to be read on the air, so they're not private. So, and I have a source who's possibly going to get me some of them, but the source mentioned, well, most of the emails, they're written in French letters. Is that a problem? And it will be a problem because it won't help me in the corpus and the dictionary and the other linguistic processing that I can do with this to have things that some of them are Arabese and some of them are Arabic. So what I'll probably do is use some of the services that the two colleagues in Egypt were mentioning to translate. I'll keep the original source available. There's a place to upload files. But what I'll do is, for the actual content part that I use, I'll use those services to translate the Arabic into the Arabic script.
You'll have to hold in mind, of course, that the French transliteration in Arabic seems to be different from English-based Arabic.
Right, and also a lot of those transliteration systems are meant to work with standard Arabic or maybe more common varieties of Arabic, so I think they'll probably choke on a lot of the Tunisian too. It'll be a case where we'll have to use the automated translation and then carefully QC it to fix any problems that come through. Yeah.
When you transcribe the audio material, so you're saying that you're transcribing it in Arabic letters, correct? In this corpus. And first, I want to echo what she said. This is an amazing project. Thank you. I was just curious, why are you doing it in Arabic letters for a spoken language? Why not IPA, for example?
Oh, that would be so much more difficult. It would be really more time consuming. It's just, you know, for one thing, I can get Arabs who are native speakers of Arabic to type in Arabic. There's no way I could get people to type in IPA unless they were linguistics graduate students. And then another reason is that I think one of the things that's interesting about this, and that I might like to study sometime in the future when I'm not completely taken up with the project itself, is like the development of the standardization of a language, which I think is very interesting. So I kind of want to capture the way people spell things when they try to write in Arabic for these words that have, you know, not traditionally been written.
Can we talk money?
Sure.
How did you find support for this great project?
I actually have no support. I'm doing this entirely on my own. The transcribers I'm paying out of my own pocket. Yeah, there's actually, I'm affiliated with Georgetown, but I'm not actually doing this for Georgetown. It's just a really bizarre hobby.
Why not apply for a grant? I mean, you've got two competitive that you could at this point go and get some money for this.
I think I'd like to, and I was so concerned with actually getting a start on the project, you know, and actually seeing if it would work and deciding, you know, where I wanted to go, and also kind of keeping control of it in its early stages to make sure I was able to direct where it's going, that I hadn't really thought about any of that, but I think probably I've now reached the point where I need to. And I'm a little disconnected from academia, so I don't really know how all of this stuff works, but anyone who is able to advise in this matter, I'd be more than happy to hear. There was another question?
Oh, I was just going to say, yeah, one of the things people do with Corpus is they ask them to search a word and find out how it's used or how frequently it occurs. So how do you deal with the spelling variations, if there's spelling variations?
That's another very good point, and another issue that I considered when making this, because there definitely are spelling variations. For instance, I was doing some analysis of it a few days ago. I don't actually have the ability to do analysis built into the web interface yet, although I hope to soon, but I can do analysis through the command line, basically talking directly with the code. And for instance, I was looking at the word barsha, which some people spell with an aleph, some people spell with a ha, and some people spell with a tarmabuta. So I found out that the ha is by far the most common variety of it, but that the others are also really used. And so I can do these kind of processes. And I think when I'm further developed, what I'd like to do is just decide what is the prevalent standard. And whatever, this is an area of disagreement between me and Milad right now, because he thinks that, you know, he's very much tied to making things as close to Fusha as possible. If it comes from a Fusha word, we should spell it the Fusha way, you know. Whereas I'm more of the opinion that we should spell it the way that everyone else is spelling it right now. Although if it's a close case, we'll probably, you know, err on the side of conservativeness. But when we get to the point where we decide what our standard is going to be, what I'll probably do is design kind of an algorithm where, like when it's doing a word count or it's doing kind of any kind of processing, it'll go through, check the word, and see, you know, if we have a standard assigned for that word. So for all the varieties of barsha, it'll be assigned to one variety of barsha, and so that's what it'll count it as.
I would really like to see the spelling variations preserved, because then it can be used to study how the process of understanding standardization occurs.
Yeah, and that was a big concern of mine, because I also want to preserve the original forms as much as possible. For instance, in the ICA, which I mentioned, reading through their procedures for how they're developing the corpus, one of their steps in their standard procedure is to go through and normalize the spelling, which I just read that I was like, no. So I definitely don't want to be that guy. And any kind of normalization that is going to necessarily happen is going to be an additional layer of computation on top. It's not going to change the original text.
Well, you could do a table of spelling variants pretty easily just by doing a word breakdown and then alphabetizing and have someone look through it for a day and just fill in the variants and check that they're without variants.
Yeah, it will probably be some kind of very simple hash table like that. Yeah, hash array. Yeah.
Can we take Summer's comment and then end the session because you have to be back into that one?
Although anyone who wants to buy me lunch, I'll be happy to talk more about it.
I was just wondering what goes into the QC process. There are different degrees of intervention. I'm just wondering what you...
It depends. Right now, my focus is more on quantity than perfection. So I'm being very pragmatic about it at this point. So, for instance, the text that I had transcribed by the Amazon Turk people, some of them were very, very bad. There was obviously native Arabs who had little knowledge of Tunisian and just were not able to cope with it. Like, you know, they did the best they could, but it was not accurate at all. So some of those, if they were just not useful at all, I rejected them. But there were a couple where I felt like the transcribers were making a very good effort and that they were doing a very thorough job in spite of the fact that they were missing a lot of Tunisian vocabulary. And so basically those are people I want to retain to work for me in the future, so I'm going to try to train them up on Tunisian. So in the case of a work like that, basically Milad will go through it and correct it as he sees fit. Now, some of the transcribers, like I have a Moroccan transcriber who just did a fabulous job. I mean, the Arabic, the French mixed in. Like I even had, in this audio, I had some guy said, "Yani ululi kulli, come and get your shit," like in English, and the guy got it. So I mean, he's just a great transcriber. So all of his work, I'm taking as being as correct as reasonable. Does that answer your question?